I love stream fishing. There's something about being alone deep in the mountains, standing by the rushing water that feels almost sacred. At least to me, anyways. But in all the years I've spent fishing in remote places, I've had a few experiences that I can't explain. Ones that still sit heavy in my mind. I'd like to share them with you. There's a certain stream in Fukushima I like to visit. That day, like any other, I parked my car, stepped out and walked to the edge of the forest trail to check the river's condition before heading down. The water looked promising, but just as I leaned forward slightly, something hit me. Hard. A force, like a strong hand, shoved my left shoulder. I stumbled forward a step. My heart was hammering. I spun around expecting to see someone behind me, but the trail was empty. No hikers, no fishermen, no animals rustling in the underbrush. Just the quiet of the mountains, the hum of the river below, and the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. A chill crept up my spine. The river wasn't particularly wide, but the banks were thick with tangled brush. It would be a hassle to even cast my line properly. Something in me soured on the idea of fishing there that day. I got back in my car, and I drove downstream, never looking back. I guess I was feeling superstitious, but something told me to get the hell out of there. Some kind of gut feeling. Something didn't want me there that day. Another time, I was driving along a stream in Akita, searching for a good entry point. I spotted one. A perfect spot, so I pulled over. Just as I was about to head down towards the water, I noticed another fisherman there already. I decided to wait, sitting in my car, smoking a cigarette, letting the minutes slip by. Eventually I glanced back towards the water. The fisherman was gone. It had only been a few moments. I hadn't even gotten halfway through my smoke, but he had completely disappeared. No sign of movement upstream or downstream. No sounds of wading, no footprints leading away. It was as if he had been erased from the landscape. A little unnerved but eager to fish, I decided to take his spot. The moment I cast my fly, a fish practically leapt for it. Strike after strike, an almost unnatural amount of bites came my way. And that's when I thought, how could the previous fisherman have been so bad? If he had been fly fishing like me, there's no way the fish would have been this eager. Unless he hadn't been fishing at all. I fished for hours, pushing away that strange feeling. When I finally returned to my car and sat there thinking it through, unease settled over me. My mind threw up a bunch of questions I didn't have the answers to. The only way out downstream was blocked by a 10-meter high dam. There hadn't been a car at the entry point, so how did he get there? I hadn't seen any parked cars along the road either as I was on my way in. If he had been fishing there before me, the fish shouldn't have been biting so aggressively, surely. I quickly left after that, watching the rear view mirror more often than I usually would. One afternoon, after a satisfying morning of fishing in Gunma, I decided to explore a tributary I hadn't visited before. It was a bright, open place where the sunlight poured down onto the riverbed, making the water sparkle. Normally a spot like this would make me feel at ease, but from the moment I stepped down onto the shore, something was off. The air felt heavy. The usual serenity of the mountains was missing somehow, replaced by a strange, oppressive silence. I tried to shake it off and focused on my flying, watching it drift with the current, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't concentrate. My skin prickled. Someone was watching me. I turned again and again, but there was nothing, no one. Yet I knew someone was there, not at my eye level, but lower, off to the left, about 1.5 meters behind me. It felt so clear, like the presence of a child sitting on the stones, knees pulled up to their chest, watching me fish. But the only thing behind me was a scattering of river rocks. I gripped my rod tighter, my pulse hammering in my ears. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I stood frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. And then, like some kind of release, a voice broke the tension.
Catching anything?
I flinched, spinning to see an older man, a local by the looks of his rugged clothes and sun-worn face. He had emerged from the trees, likely a forestry worker. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. Not really. He nodded and then pointed downstream. You know that rapid down there? I followed his gaze to the spot where the river turned violent, white water crashing over jagged rocks. Yeah, I saw that on the way in. He sighed. Last week, a kid drowned there. He was playing in the shallows and got swept away. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked back at the spot where I'd felt the presence, that empty patch of stones. That was enough for me. I packed up my gear and left without another word, driving past the rapid where the child had died. The current raged, relentless, as if it had never taken a life. But I knew better. And as I looked back at the river one last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone somewhere was still watching. Back in 2020, I was living alone in a small rental apartment in Furukawa, Miyagi Prefecture. It wasn't glamorous, but it was cozy enough for someone like me, just starting fresh in a new job. I'd been living with my family before the move, so the shift to solitude was both exciting and intimidating. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes with being surrounded by families who kept themselves to themselves. It suited me. I'd always thought of myself as independent, but being truly alone was a new experience. At night, though, when the neighborhood was still and the shadows stretched across the walls, I sometimes found myself missing the comfort of home. A voice in the next room, the sound of someone moving about, or a friendly face coming through the door. The rainy season didn't help. The air was thick and muggy, the kind of heat that clung to your skin and made sleep near impossible. Most nights I tossed and turned, my sheets twisted around me. By morning, I dragged myself to work, bleary-eyed and heavy-limbed, wondering if I'd ever adjust to this new lifestyle. It started one night in mid-June. I was half asleep, staring at the ceiling and counting down the hours until my alarm would ring. Suddenly, the silence of my apartment was broken by a loud mechanical noise. I recognized the sound almost instantly. It was my fax machine. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, totally confused. Now, I didn't use the fax machine often. It was there mainly for work, and the only people who had that number were my office and my parents. So I couldn't think of any reason why someone would be sending me a fax at this hour. I shuffled out of bed and into the living room, and by the time I got there, the noise had stopped. The machine sat silent and still, its paper tray empty. I checked the logs, nothing. No record of an incoming call or message, no number displayed. I stared at the machine, my tired brain struggling to make sense of it. Was it a glitch? Had I dreamed the sound? I shook my head and decided to let it go, heading back to bed. Still, it made me feel a little weird. The next morning, I checked the fax machine again. Nothing had changed, no paper, no record of any activity. At work, I casually mentioned it to my coworkers, trying to find out if anyone had tried to send me something late at night. They just gave me puzzled looks and shook their heads. Later, I called my parents, just to be sure. "A fax? At midnight? No, of course not," my mum said. "Who sends faxes anymore anyway?" Her dismissal was meant to be reassuring, but it left me with more questions than answers. Maybe it was just a mistake, I told myself. A misdial, a glitch. I wanted to find out the answer, but I knew I just had to move on. About 10 days later, it happened again. It was the same routine. Late at night, the strange whirring noise pulling me out of a restless sleep. This time I didn't rush to check. Instead, I lay in bed, my heart pounding as I stared at the ceiling. "Not again," I whispered to myself. When the noise stopped, I reluctantly got up and went to the living room. Just like before, the paper tray was empty. No sender, no number, nothing. I stood there, in the dim light, staring at the machine. I'll be honest, I felt a little creeped out by that machine. I know it's such a mad thing to say. This wasn't a glitch though. I knew that it couldn't be. The calls didn't stop. They came sporadically, always at night, always leaving no trace. By autumn, I'd started to dread the sound of the machine. The shrill electronic whine would jolt me awake, and I'd lie there paralyzed, waiting for it to stop. I'd unplug it, but I actually needed it for work. Sometimes we would get an early morning memo or something from the office that we had to be reactive to. Plus, I didn't really feel like going into the office one morning, explaining to my seniors why I missed their message, so it stayed plugged in and on. I started to feel like I was being watched. The shadows in my apartment seemed darker, the silence heavier. I kept the lights on at night and double-checked the locks on my doors and windows. But no matter what I did, the fax calls kept coming. By winter, I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And by March in 2011, I decided to move back closer to be with my family. It wasn't just getting woke up by some fax machine. It was a lot of other things. Work had been taking a toll on me. More so than I realized. It was non-stop, and I had so many duties and expectations to live up to. I needed a fresh start. I found a new apartment, and I started making arrangements with the real estate office. One weekday in March, I took a day off to run some errands. I stopped at a gas station to fill up my tank, knowing I'd be driving around a lot that day. Just as I was pulling out of that gas station, my phone rang. It was the real estate office. I answered, but all I could hear was static, and beneath it, a faint familiar sound. It was the whine of a fax machine. Confused, I hung up. Moments later, the same number called again. This time, I didn't bother answering. As I drove towards a large supermarket, my mind raced. Why would the real estate office send a fax to my phone? It didn't make any sense. I parked outside the store, still trying to make sense of it. And that was when the ground beneath me started to shake. At 2:46 p.m. on March 11th, 2011, the East Japan earthquake struck. It's impossible to describe the sheer terror of that moment. The earth roared, the pavement buckled, and the world seemed to come apart at the seams. Inside the supermarket, people screamed as shelves toppled and glass shattered. Outside, cars rocked violently, their alarms blaring. I clung to the side of my car, my knees shaking, unable to stand. When the shaking finally stopped, I looked at the supermarket. The building was unrecognizable. Its roof caved in, windows blown out. If not for that strange call, I would have 100% been inside there. In the days that followed, I thought a lot about that fax machine. I asked the real estate office about the call, but they insisted they hadn't tried to contact me that day. Was it a coincidence, a glitch, or something else entirely? I'll never know for sure. The earthquake left a deep scar on my life. Most lives, actually. My apartment building was badly damaged and I couldn't return. The roads were destroyed and it took me hours to reach my family, but I was alive. And to this day, I keep that gas station receipt from that afternoon, stamped 2:35 p.m., just minutes before the quake. It's a reminder of how close I came to disaster, and how something or someone might have been looking out for me. The fax machine, oddly enough, survived the quake. I kept that thing for years, but after that day, it never acted up again. Sometimes I think about this strange sequence of events. The midnight calls, the inexplicable warnings. Part of me wants to dismiss it as a coincidence, but another part believes it was something more. Whatever it was, I'm grateful. Life is fragile, unpredictable. It's easy to take the small, strange moments for granted, but sometimes they're the ones that matter the most. This happened when I was a university student living alone in Tokyo. I wasn't living a life of luxury. My apartment was pretty damn small, but I did like it, and it was the corner apartment of the top floor, so it let in plenty of light. I picked this apartment because the rent was considerably cheaper than any other apartment in that building. I knew why it was cheap. It was an accident property, a home with a history. I didn't care though. I'm the type of person who doesn't really believe in the paranormal. I trust in science and logic. So I had no hesitation when signing the contract. As soon as I moved in, odd things began to happen. It started with the kettle. It would just flick on by itself and the water would start boiling. It was pretty jarring to hear that late at night, let me tell you. A couple of times I woke up due to the noise it made. I used to leave the kettle unplugged after use, but I didn't always remember to unplug it. The kettle would never flip on if the lights was on though. It only did it when it was dark. I have to admit, it was pretty scary, but I kind of grew to live with it. I woke up one night unable to move anything but my eyes. It was a completely new sensation for me. I didn't know at the time, but it was sleep paralysis. I was surprisingly calm. Maybe that was because I didn't know what was going on. I just moved my eyes around the room. I had a floor chair and a kotatsu in the middle of the room. It's a little table you just put your legs under to keep warm when sitting on the floor. Some have electric heaters. Anyway, I looked towards that area and I saw the strangest thing I've ever seen. It looked like there were people sat in my chairs, but they didn't look like real people. They were like stick men. What I mean by that is they had outlines, white outlines, but they were in the shape of people. Very strange. When I saw it, I laughed inside. I just couldn't move my mouth. I didn't understand what was going on. It was all so weird. Then the next thing I knew, I was asleep. I guess I must have fallen asleep as I woke up, and I saw the morning light filtering in through the curtains. I could freely move my arms and legs, so I just got up and got on with my day. It was around that time that I landed a part-time job working in an izakaya, which is a restaurant/bar here. I had no complaints working late at night because of the weird goings-on at home. I was more than happy to pick up a night shift, plus I was making some good money. Anyways, one night I came home from work and I noticed something. There were shoe prints on my door. It looked as if someone had tried kicking it in or something. I was there mumbling and complaining to myself as I opened my door. I turned around to see the reverse side of the door to check the damage, and when I did that, I saw the same kind of shoe print marks on the inside of the door. Those marks definitely were not there when I left for work. I got all my shoes out and I checked the shoe prints against what was in my room. I didn't own any kind of shoe like that. I didn't give anyone a key and I always locked my door. It was really weird and getting scarier by each passing day. At night. I was getting really freaked out. I mean, I was about 20 years old, a female, living alone for the first time in my life. I got so worried that I called my parents and told them what was happening. To be honest, I was beginning to think about moving at that stage. You can imagine my parents' shock when they heard about the footprints. They wanted me to get out of there straight away, and I agreed, to be honest. I began the search for a new place. I found somewhere new. It was a bit more expensive, but Mum and Dad offered to help me out a little, so it worked. When I was packing up my things, I heard something get delivered into my mailbox. It was just a simple letterbox with a cage. I heard what sounded like a huge wad of envelopes get shoved through it. None of the mail was addressed to me. It was all addressed to some woman. Her name sounded old, like she wasn't another student. It would be like getting mail addressed to a Dorothy or something nowadays. Apparently, she lived in that room years ago. I didn't get any mail from anyone but the mail that was meant for me whilst I was living there. I don't know why the hell that turned up all of a sudden. I kind of wish I opened some of it now, just so I could tell you what was in it. It was a bit freaky though. I didn't want to touch it. I moved away after that. I just had to. I'm sorry if this story barely makes any sense or is different to the usual kinds of ones that are shared. I didn't really have a haunting per se. I just had a series of very strange but very true events. So I guess my message to anyone is, be careful of homes with a history, and be wary of a cheap price. We've known each other since high school, and even as adults, we still hang out occasionally, whether in person or online playing games. Akane has this elegant, refined look, like she walked straight out of a wealthy family's estate. She has this youthful face that makes it hard to pin down her actual age. There's something fragile about her too, a quiet kind of beauty that draws attention in, even when she isn't trying. She's friendly to everyone, always wearing a gentle smile, though she insists she's shy. I've never really seen any evidence of that, but maybe she just has her own definition of what shyness is. She's the type who keeps her circle small but deep. If she lets you in, she's kind, loyal, and genuinely cares about you. How are things going with Haruto? I asked her one day. Akane sighed. We had fun at first. We went out a lot, played a lot of games together, spent a lot of our time talking, but lately something's off. I don't know what it is. I don't know what to do. Off how? He's become really clingy, moody. He gets upset if I don't reply fast enough. He just says things like, I can't live without you. Then he starts crying and throwing fits. Haruto was the first guy Akane dated after I became friends with her. Listening to her, I figured she just had a bit of bad luck falling for a guy with some unstable emotions. Akane is effortlessly kind, which can be dangerous for men who aren't used to female attention. You should put some distance between you two, I advised, because it's only going to get worse. A few days later, she told me that she had cut ties with Haruto, but that didn't mean she was done with relationships. Akane was popular. There was always another guy, another romance, and yet every single time something went wrong. Ren changed after we started dating. He dropped out of school, and now he stays home, anxious and restless all the time. Sota? He was supposed to go overseas for work, but he vanished. He was already acting weird before the trip, like he was spiraling into something dark. I was glad to see the back of it. Kenta used to be so fun to hang out with, but now he's dropped out of his program. Says he got depressed and just stopped functioning. He was so ambitious before, it's really hard to watch. And Daiki, I don't know. At first he was cool and independent, but now he's just always clinging to me, always sad when I'm not around. He used to ignore my small requests, but now he does everything I ask. Even before I ask it, it's almost too much. I started to notice a pattern. Akane wasn't just dating these guys. She was ruining them. At first I thought it was just bad luck, but when you're as attractive and approachable as Akane, you attract all kinds of people. Some of them are bound to be unstable. But after so many similar stories, I started to wonder, was this really a coincidence? Or was there something about Akane herself that made them like this? A few years passed, but we got into a new online game and reconnected. Sometimes we just played the two of us. Other times we'd join other players, and that's how we met Riku. Riku was close to us in age. He lived in a nearby city and had a relaxed and easygoing personality. We all got along well, and before I knew it, the three of us were playing together almost every night. One night, Riku came to me with a request. "I like Akane. Can you help me get closer to her?" I had suspected so much, so I agreed. I gave him advice, hyped him up, and sure enough, Akane and Riku started dating. Things seemed fine at first. The three of us still played games together and had fun, but then 6 months later, Riku came to me again. "If I stay with Akane, I think I might lose myself." "What do you mean?" I asked him. "Well, she's amazing, of course. She cares about me so much. She's always sweet and understanding. Being with her makes me happy, but I can't think about anything else anymore. It's the weirdest thing. It's like she's all I think about. It's like she's taking over my mind." I laughed. Who wouldn't? "Wow, that's dramatic. You sound like a guy who's head over heels in love." "No, it's not that," he said. "It's like she's in control of me. I know I should feel weird about it, but instead I feel good. Like I want her to control me. And that scares the hell out of me." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I asked him what Akane was like when they were alone together. "Well, she's thoughtful, she spoils me a little, and yeah, she can be selfish sometimes, but she always makes me feel like I'm the most important person in the world. No matter what I do, she never gets mad. If I screw up, she just smiles and says stuff like, 'Riku, that makes me really sad. I want you to do it this way. But I know you're always so kind to me, so I'm sure you'll do better next time, right?' It's weird. So weird. I've never been the type to care about pleasing others, but with Akane, I want to. I want to make her happy. It doesn't feel like she's forcing me. It's just like I'm doing it on my own. And that's what freaks me out the most." I told him about the others, about Haruto, Ren, Sota, Kenta, Daiki, about what happened to them after they all fell for Akane. Riku went pale. He was quiet for a long time, before finally saying, "I need to leave her." "Are you sure?" "Yeah, if I stay too long, I'll do anything for her. Anything. And that's not okay. I'm scared of what I might become." After that, Riku disappeared from our lives. He quit the game. He stopped answering messages, and it was like he had erased all traces of himself from our world. As her friend, I never felt the pull of Akane's influence the way these men did, but I've seen the results too many times to ignore them. Akane never asks for devotion. She never demands love, never manipulates in an obvious way. She doesn't have to. Somehow, By just being herself, she draws people in, reshapes them, makes them forget about who they were before they met her. And she doesn't even realize she's doing it. I still talk to her. I consider her a friend. But now, I keep a careful distance, because sooner or later, someone else is going to fall for Akane. And I don't want to watch it happen again. Tohoku region, and my usual route included a small, worn-out station tucked deep in the countryside, a place where time felt slower. One morning, as usual, I met up with a close friend and we waited together for the train that would carry us to school. When it arrived, we moved to board. Something terrible happened. Just as she stepped forward, her foot slipped right into the narrow gap between the platform and the train. Now, normally, the gap wasn't wide enough to be truly dangerous. Most people wouldn't even think twice about it. But she had slipped just at the wrong angle, and her thigh caught the platform's edge, stopping her from falling all the way through. The station master and the surrounding commuters reacted quickly. The train was halted before departure. With combined effort, we managed to pull her out. She was shaken but conscious, and her leg bloodied from the sharp scrape of metal and concrete. She was visibly injured. She sat there trembling on the platform. I knelt beside her to check her leg, trying to comfort her. That's when I saw it. Now, from my low position, my eyes naturally dropped towards the gap she had fallen. At first I noticed the glint of fresh blood dripping from her calf. But then something else caught my attention. Something was wrapped around her ankle. I squinted, leaning in, my breath catching in my throat, because to me it looked like a hand, but not just any hand. It was impossibly small, like a doll's hand, thin, pale, but not the porcelain of a toy. It was flesh, wrinkled, aged, and unmistakably real. The fingers attached were long, too long, and they clung tightly to her ankle in a way that sent icy panic running through my veins. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, and then right before my eyes the hand released her, and it slipped back into the shadow of the gap like a serpent retreating into a den. Gone, just like that. She hadn't seen it. She kept insisting that her foot had simply slipped. She hadn't noticed anything grab her, and when I asked, too casually, trying to mask the shaking in my voice, if she felt anything strange, she looked at me blankly. I didn't press the issue. At the time, we were too focused on getting her medical help. But after she was taken away by ambulance, and I was left standing alone on the platform, I finally allowed myself to think, really think, about what I had seen. It wasn't a ghost. Nah, I'm not the type to believe in those. I've never seen or felt anything paranormal before or since. This was something else. This was something alive. Something that lives in the gaps. I couldn't shake the realism of it. The detailed skin, the tight grip, the deliberate way it had vanished once I'd noticed it. It wasn't some hazy flicker of light. It had form, mass, intent. Later, I'd heard rumors from locals about that station. They say back in post-war years, a child had slipped and fallen between the train and platform. No one had noticed until it was too late. Her body was found crushed and lifeless, her tiny hands stretched upwards from the darkness. Some say that that station was cursed from that day. Others whisper of a being that hides in the narrow cracks of the world, in platform gaps, in wall crevices, beneath tatami mats, something small, persistent, hungry. I don't know what I saw. I only know that since that day, I never stand too close to the edge, and when I board a train, I always glance down first, just in case it's reaching. This story isn't just scary. It's deeply mysterious and profoundly tragic. Even today, it haunts my thoughts with unanswered questions. About 7 years ago, around 10 o'clock at night, I was walking home from cram school with a friend when we both heard a loud crash behind us. Turning around, we saw the aftermath of a traffic accident involving a motorcycle and a car. Although we didn't witness the collision itself, the sound, the sickening crunch of metal made our hearts jump into our throats. From what we could gather afterward, it seemed the motorcycle had attempted to turn onto a narrow side street just as the car was passing straight through the intersection, causing them to collide violently. We immediately rushed over to help, well, as much as two high school students could, along with the driver from the car and several neighbors who'd come outside after hearing the noise. The motorcyclist lay motionless on the asphalt, thrown several feet from his bike. "Hey, are you okay?" the car driver asked, frantically, clearly shaken by what had happened. Then unexpectedly, the motorcyclist stirred and rose swiftly to his feet, removing his helmet. He looked around blankly for a moment before calmly reassuring everyone, "I'm fine. There's nothing wrong." He appeared entirely uninjured, and even began walking away, leaving his damaged motorcycle lying in the road. The car driver desperately tried to stop him, saying, Wait, we need to call the police and an ambulance, just to be sure." But the motorcyclist dismissed the concern with a gentle smile, saying casually, "It's alright, my house is just over there. I'll go get my parents, I'll come back." With those words, he disappeared down the dark, narrow alley, quickly swallowed up by the night. Confused and still shaken, my friend and I eventually continued home. Though something felt deeply unsettling about the encounter, it just felt like it was over way too quickly, About 3 months later, my friend and I were hanging out at a convenience store near that accident spot when a middle-aged man approached us hesitantly. "Hey, are you kids local kids?" he asked. His eyes looked tired and filled with sadness. "Yeah, we are." We responded cautiously. Of course, at our age, we were constantly reminded to be wary of strangers. "Oh, you see, a few months ago, my son had an accident here. He hasn't come home since, and I've been desperately looking for him," the man said, pulling out a photograph. My heart stopped. The young man in the picture was unmistakably the motorcyclist we'd seen that night. I was certain of it. Confused, I said gently, "But your son walked away. After the accident, he said he was going home to get you and your wife." The man shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of sorrow and confusion. "Yeah, I've heard that from others around here too, but you see, our home is very far away, in another prefecture. You'd have to take a plane to get there." His voice trailed off, heavy with the weight of loss and unanswered questions. He looked at us earnestly, desperately hoping for some clue we might provide, eyeing us up and down, offering a pause, a gap of silence that we might fill. We couldn't, though. "Are you absolutely sure this was my son?" he asked. "Yes, sir," we replied. I recognized every feature, the hairstyle, the face, the calm yet confused demeanor. We definitely remembered him. "I see," he murmured. "Well, if you remember anything else, could you please let me know?" With that, the man handed us a flyer and walked away, shoulders slumped, carrying with him the painful mystery of his son's disappearance. Even today, I can't help but wonder what truly happened that night. Had the young man suffered some Invisible injury, wandering confused into the darkness, never to be found again? Or had something far stranger and more tragic occurred, leaving his family forever lost in uncertainty and grief? Whatever the truth, it remains hidden in the shadows of that narrow road he walked down. And those same shadows will haunt my memories forever. My grandfather's hometown was in Ibaraki, Japan. And back in the old days, the burials there were done the traditional way, by placing the dead directly into the earth. The coffins they used weren't like the rectangular wooden boxes we think of today. Instead, they were shaped more like barrels, and the deceased were placed inside in a curled up sitting position, their knees tucked against their chests. That's how I understand it, at least. The cemetery itself wasn't on solid inland ground. It was tucked away behind a dense thicket of trees just beyond the beach. For years, it sat there quietly, undisturbed, until nature began to reclaim it. Around the mid-1960s, coastal erosion started eating away at the shore, and the waves crept closer and closer to the burial grounds. Each year, the tides came in a little farther, licking at the graves that had once been safe from the sea. By that time, most families had already moved their ancestral graves to safer locations, leaving behind only the lonely, forgotten dead, those whose family lines had disappeared over time. They were the muenbotoke, the abandoned souls, spirits with no descendants to tend to them. Even as the sea swallowed more of the land, no one did anything to protect the remaining graves. Maybe it was because they weren't directly responsible for them, or maybe there was something deeper, an unconscious reluctance to disturb the dead any further. Whatever the reason, the cemetery remained untouched, even as some of the graves started to vanish beneath the tide. It wasn't long before the inevitable happened. The waves began to pull at the soil, carrying it away, grain by grain. As the earth eroded, some of the coffins started surfacing, their lids long since rotted away. Bones, once hidden under layers of earth, were now exposed to the salty air, and when the tide was strong enough, it carried them out to sea. The stretch of coastline had always been dangerous. The waters looked deceptively calm, shallow for a long way out, making it easy for people to wade in with confidence. But then, without warning, the seabed would drop off into a sudden, terrifying depth. The current there was treacherous, strong enough to drag even the most seasoned swimmers out into the abyss, never to return. And of course, you'd have to be brave to swim out there. The murky darkness below hid aquatic creatures with teeth. Local fishermen and villagers had always known better than to swim there. They warned others to stay away, but not everybody listened. The year the bones began to wash away, a typhoon struck. The storm brought towering waves crashing into the already weakened shore. By the time the winds had settled and the waters receded, there was no trace of the cemetery left. Every single grave had been erased by the ocean. After that, strange things started happening. People who lived near the shore reported hearing voices at night, whispers carried out on the wind, hushed conversations in the darkness. Some even claimed to hear someone calling out, "Oi," a long drawn-out cry, as if someone was searching for something or someone. The villagers who had ignored the problem for so long could no longer turn a blind eye. They decided the abandoned souls needed to be put to rest properly. They needed to be acknowledged, prayed for, honored. And so they built a small shrine on high stilts where the graveyard once had been, hoping it would serve as a place for the spirits to gather and find peace. But by then it was too late. Around that same time, Japan's surfing culture was booming, and groups of thrill-seekers started scouring the coast for new, undiscovered spots with the best waves. That cursed beach, with its strong tides and deadly undercurrents, caught their attention. They had no idea what happened there, no idea what had been lost beneath those waves. One by one, they disappeared. At first, it was written off as bad luck. People underestimated the sea all the time. But then the stories started coming. Surfers who survived spoke of something grabbing at their legs, yanking them downward. Others swore they saw figures standing waist deep in the water, only to vanish as soon as they looked at them directly. The town tried to put a stop to it. They put up warning signs, banned swimming and surfing, but it didn't matter. Those who came looking for adventure never listened, and so the accidents continued. It was only after the shrine was built and proper offerings were made that things began to quiet down. The voices grew fainter. The disappearances became less frequent. The sea returned to its usual, indifferent self. Still, even today, my cousin tells me that on rare nights, if the wind is just right, you can still hear something out there, low, murmuring voices carried across the water. Not quite words, but not just the sound of the waves either. Something in between. Maybe the spirits of the Muen Botoke finally found some rest. Or maybe, after all those years of being forgotten, they learned to live with being part of the sea. Something terrifying happened when I went camping in the north. I'm currently a sophomore at university, a student at a no-name bottom-tier college in Japan's northern frontier. Even now in my second year, I don't really have many friends. Still, somehow, I'm managing to have a fun student life. Because my university focuses on biology, I naturally became interested in nature, animals, and the environment. And since I've already been living out here in the wild north, I started to think, wouldn't it be cool to spend a full day immersed in nature, maybe even get a chance to observe some animals? It was still early in the season, and although there were patches of lingering snow in the mountains, they were bustling with people foraging for wild plants. So, one day I decided to plan an overnight trip into the mountains. On the day of the trip, I packed my backpack with the following: water, food, writing tools, a hatchet-like tool, a camera, portable phone charger, radio, towel, and a foldable tent that I borrowed from my dad. That's about it. The mountain I chose was close to civilization and often visited by wild plant gatherers, so I remember my parents weren't all that worried. Once I was fully prepared, I got a good night's sleep. The next day I slung on my backpack and rode the bus a few transfers and arrived at the mountain after about a 20-minute walk. The trees hadn't fully turned green yet, and there was still some snow here and there, but I was super excited. It had been a while since I'd done something like this, and I couldn't wait to charge into the forest. But if I really had charged in, I guess I might not be here to tell you this story. That mountain is known for the occasional brown bear sighting, so bear deterrents were absolutely essential. Still, I had a little bit of know-how, so I turned the volume way up as I entered the mountain. As I pushed through the underbrush, listening to a baseball broadcast, it felt like my soul was being cleansed. After walking for a bit, I came across a small river. The area looked like something had plowed through the grass, flattening it. I didn't really understand it, but I thought it was part of nature's beauty. I wrote it down in my field notebook. I decided to follow this flattened path. Honestly, looking back at it now, I was way too cocky about the whole thing. I'd been practicing karate, and I even hold a black belt, and I had a hatchet with me too, so I thought nothing could touch me. God, I was so stupid. A little while later, I even ran into a deer. We learned about the overpopulation of Ezo deer in Hokkaido, so I made a note of that too. I was in a great mood after that deer encounter, so I kept heading deeper into the mountains, munching on snacks. The deeper I went, the more confidence I felt. Forging my own trail gave me a sense of bravery. I kept pressing forward. Maybe about 5 minutes later, I realized that I was lost. But I didn't panic, not right away. The forest wasn't that big, and I figured as long as I'd head in the direction I came from, I'd be fine. That's what I told myself anyway. But as most of you probably know, once you're on a mountain, you absolutely have no way of knowing which direction you came from. All the scenery looks the same. Aside from that one flattened path, everything seemed identical. Unless you're a bird, there's no way you're going to find your way back. Still, I kept walking. I don't know why. As the sun began to set, I noticed the flattened path I'd been following was gone. Just like that, it had disappeared without me realizing. So I aimed for the direction I thought I'd entered from and started walking. I remember this part clearly. There weren't any animals around, and the grass was the same generic stuff you'd see anywhere. It was kind of boring, honestly. After walking a while, I found myself completely lost again. And of course my phone had no signal. The radio was also cutting in and out, filled with static. Even I, as clueless as I was, finally started to realize that things were spiraling downhill fast. There's no time to be writing in the field notebook. I need to get back now. That was the only thought that was on my mind. I started moving quickly through the forest, and before long I spotted the same flattened path I'd seen earlier. Relieved, I began following it again. I was certain, absolutely certain, that if I stuck to this trail I'd make it back to where I'd entered the mountain. But I hadn't considered the worst possibility, that this path might not be the same one I had followed before. I shifted from a brisk walk into a jog, and then into a full-on sprint. But something felt off. The scenery wasn't quite right. Even after running for about 20 minutes, I wasn't getting anywhere near the entrance of the trail. And then up ahead, the trees opened up into a clearing. It was strangely quiet. I clearly remember whispering to myself, I've messed up again. Right in front of me was a massive tree, and at its roots, an unnaturally large hole. It was obvious. A bear den. You know, in the movies where someone suddenly runs into a monster or an enemy, and the background noise cuts out completely? That's exactly what it felt like. There was no sound, nothing. Maybe it lasted only a few seconds, but in that moment, there was total silence. Then when the silence lifted, I became acutely aware of my own breathing. Maybe it was the cold, but I remember my hands felt ice cold. That's what stuck with me the most. It was dusk now. Luckily the bear wasn't inside the den. For some reason I slowly backed away and walked away from the hole. I tripped on a branch halfway through though, but I managed to get myself away. I had somehow escaped the bear's den. My entire body was beyond exhausted. I was mentally worn out, completely drained. That's when I found a relatively open area and decided to camp there for the night. You're probably thinking, why would you camp there? Just go home. Seriously though, my body wouldn't move anymore. It was impossible. I was so exhausted, I needed to rest. Luckily I had a good radio reception in that spot, so I turned the volume up as loud as it would go. I decided to ride the night out with the radio on. By then, it was almost completely dark. Time had passed faster than I realized. I pulled out a rice ball I had packed and took a bite, and for some reason, memories of my mum came flooding back, and I started to cry a little. I sobbed, but eventually I stopped crying and sipped some of my tea. With my stomach full and nothing else to do, I lay down and started playing a game on my phone to help me settle into sleep. I listened to the grass swaying in the wind, a soft rustling sound, peaceful at first. Then I heard it. Crack, crack. The classic sound, something stepping on twigs out in the woods. I shot up and instinctively shoved my hand into my pocket. My digital camera was gone. That's when for some reason I reached over to the radio and turned it off. Then I focused all my attention on the sound, trying to figure out what was causing those footsteps. I was certain of one thing. This wasn't a deer. This wasn't a raccoon either. This was something different. It had a weight to it, like something heavy was moving. Normally with the radio playing, nothing would come close. That was the moment my sense of reality cracked. The bear, the same one from earlier, had probably caught the scent of my digital camera where I dropped it and was now interested in me. My breathing started to quicken. almost like a dog panting. I didn't say a word, I just kept staring at the ground. For some reason, I think I even pretended to be asleep, but all that effort was for nothing. The bear came. It was right there. Its loud huffing snorts grew closer. It must have realized that there was something in the tent that smelled just like the camera. It walked directly up to the tent. I locked my eyes on a single spot and didn't move. Oddly, I felt calm, like I was at peace, even though I was probably gonna die. I felt strangely fulfilled. I started whispering to the bear, as if trying to apologize. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I don't know why, but when you're faced with something that you know you can't beat, you just want to apologize, I guess. But of course, the bear kept coming. And then, it was right next to the tent. My throat was getting dry. My heart was pounding so hard that I thought it might burst. I genuinely thought, this is it. I'm dead. A Buddhist chant started playing in my head. That's how far gone I was. And that's when I noticed something. The bear wasn't coming from the front of the tent. It was approaching from the opposite side of the entrance. A stupid thought came into my brain. I might be able to run. I slowly reached into my backpack, pulled out the hatchet, and then I wobbled to my feet. I figured the bear was still sniffing around outside the tent. Standing up was the easy part, but the tent was sealed shut with a zipper. If that bear heard the sound of the zipper, it'd be over. So I took one deep breath and slowly, carefully, started unzipping it, inch by inch. Then disaster struck. Something must have snagged the silent mode switch on my iPhone. It vibrated loudly. At that moment, I swear I wanted to smash my iPhone into pieces. Panicking, I fumbled with the switch, turning the silent mode on and off again. I must have looked completely unhinged. The bear already knew I was there. I gave up on stealth and yanked the zipper all the way down at once, tumbling out of the tent. It was freezing outside, pitch black, and the ground was muddy from the rain. If I'd remembered right, you're not supposed to turn your back on a brown bear. That thought had flashed through my head, and I turned to face it. It was the real thing, no question about it. A genuine brown bear. I'd only ever seen them in zoos before, and yet, standing there, staring at this massive living creature in the wild, there was something almost divine about it. The bear, maybe startled by my sudden presence, stood still and kept staring at me. It was about 2 meters away, with only the tent between us. Strangely, I wasn't trembling. My thoughts were all jumbled up. I was a complete mess. I thought about my family, my friends, my girlfriend, even the bus schedule back in town. For some reason, that popped into my head. It reminded me of the scene from Baki, the one where Pickle confronts the research team. The researchers are standing there thinking stuff like, he's huge, would a gun even work? I was thinking stuff like, he's huge, is the weak spot on the nose? Is this how the Sankambetsu bear attack started? But really, that moment probably only lasted about 3 seconds. Of course, the bear wasn't going to keep standing there forever. Eventually it growled. It was a low, guttural sound. The moment I heard that sound, it sent chills through my skin. I've practiced karate for a long time, but that was the first time I ever felt real physical killing intent. It was like something brushed across my skin. I think my brain just broke a little from the fear. I slowly raised the hatchet above my own head, as if trying to make myself look bigger. Apparently that's a real thing. Making yourself look as big as you can scare off a bear. I only learned that later though. At the time, I think my body just acted on instinct. And then, I still didn't really understand it, but the bear suddenly looked up at me and roared. Then it turned around and took off in a brisk jog. It was running away. I did it. Honestly, I'm staying anon in this story, so I'll be as real with you as I possibly can. I did wet myself there when it roared, but at that moment I felt like I had just stared death in the face and won. As soon as I realized that the bear was retreating, my knees gave out and I collapsed. I sat there on the cold, wet ground, watching its massive body sway as it disappeared into the dark. A strange sense of euphoria washed over me, and it was awesome. I listened as the sound of the bear's footsteps faded into the distance. Now that I was sure it was gone, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I opened the flashlight app on my iPhone and began scanning the area around me. Nighttime in the mountains wilderness seemed strangely beautiful. The air felt heavy, tense, not just cold, but like the cold coming from somewhere deeper, something unnatural. As I swept the light across the forest floor, I noticed something strange. There were footprints, clearly left by the bear, in the soft, rain-soaked earth. But the trail itself, it wasn't the same as the flattened path from earlier. This new path looked weird. It looked like something had been dragged across the ground, like someone had pulled a felled log through here. It was definitely different from where the bear had walked. Still, the trail looked fresh. Some of the grass was still bent, but looked like it was trying to spring back into place. Wherever that trail led, I wasn't about to follow it. Not after everything that had just happened. I'd learned my lesson. I decided to stay put and head back into the tent. And that's when I heard it. A voice. It sounded like someone was having a conversation. Up to that point in my life, I'd never experienced anything remotely supernatural. But this was the middle of nowhere, a place no one should be. And as I heard that voice, I knew this was something from the other side. Once again, like before, all sound suddenly vanished. Not just the ambient noise, everything. It was like the world went mute. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. What the hell? Is this really happening? I thought. The voice stopped, but a few seconds later it started again. I couldn't make out words, so I strained my ears to listen. It was faint, but I could hear something like, "Ie no, wae no, wa." The same phrase repeated again and again. The tone was like a question, like the inflection to it, you know? And that voice was incredibly gentle, definitely a woman's voice. But even though it sounded soft, it was terrifying. I couldn't respond. I didn't understand the words. I just stood there frozen. Then something clicked in my head like a sharp jolt. This isn't a ghost. I don't normally believe in sixth sense stuff, but at that moment I just knew the voice belonged to something alive. Still, the voice was coming from somewhere deep in the underbrush. No way I was going near that. I remember clearly how unnaturally cold the air felt around me, and then as I stared towards the bushes, I heard it. A dragging sound. Something was coming. Something was coming straight towards me. I never imagined it would actually come closer. Whatever was in the brush was approaching, and I wasn't ready. Mentally, physically, nothing. There's no kind of prep for this. I grabbed the hatchet and raised it, ready to swing at anything. I braced myself to pounce the moment something leapt out at me. And the voice kept coming closer. That weird, faint muttering from earlier. It was getting clearer now. Noa, The words had a strange rhythm to them. The intonation was weird. It sounded like a dialect I'd never heard before. I was backed into a corner, so I tried communicating. "Who's there?" My voice cracked, but I forced it out. I hoped whatever was there could hear me. But the voice didn't change, it just kept asking. "Yeah, no why?" I asked, "Who are you?" several more times, louder each time. But the only response I got was the same phrase, repeated again and again. "Why?" It was like I was being mocked from inside the brush. I got pissed off, and I finally yelled, "Who are you? Shut the hell up, damn it!" The second I shouted, the air itself seemed to tighten, like a taut wire had just snapped and everything went still. No reply, no movement. It was like whatever was out there had just stopped. But I was too riled up, so I made the worst mistake of the night. I shouted, "Come out here, you piece of shit!" I regretted it the moment the words left my mouth. A wave of panic surged through my body, and then I heard a voice, clear and sharp this time. Wempe. It wasn't gentle anymore. You know how the teacher says, "I'm not mad, just tell me the truth," but you can tell they're angry. Yeah, that's exactly how it felt. I didn't even know what Wempe meant, but I just started apologizing anyway. "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry." I even tried it in English. "I'm so sorry, I'm sorry." I must have apologized 1,000 times. I seriously don't know what was wrong with me. Then I prostrated myself, forehead on the dirt, a full-on dogeza. Mud smeared all over me, but I didn't care. When people are truly terrified, their faces just go blank. And that's what I'd become, just a face, frozen in fear. And then something peeked out from the brush. Just an eye. A single eye, sticking out ever so slightly. It was watching me intently. The eye. It looked human, sort of, but trailing from the eyeball, where you'd expect it to be connected to a body, with thin antenna-like tendrils stretching into the shadows. It didn't blink, it didn't twitch, it just stared. And for some reason I stared right back. I don't know why, but deep down, I felt that if I looked away, something would happen. Something worse. Even though my legs had given out, I remembered that hatchet still in my hand. I gripped it, tight, tighter. And then I stood up, wobbling. The eye was still watching me. Somewhere in my mind I thought, this thing's probably weaker than the bear. I know, absolutely stupid logic, but to me it was just a giant eyeball, a freaky speech-mumbling eyeball. And somehow that gave me a shred of courage. Muttering nonsense versions of the Heart Sutra, I started walking towards the brush. The eyes kept its gaze on me. But I could tell its focus had shifted from me to the hatchet in my hand. The muttering changed. Boye? Duye? The syllables were slightly different now, like it was reacting to the hatchet. And that's when I screamed and brought the hatchet down, aiming straight for the eye. The antenna twitched and curled in a jerking L shape, and then the thing let out a howl, a screech unlike anything I'd ever heard. But it wasn't just a woman's scream. There was another voice mixed in, low, guttural, like an old man growling from deep in his chest. Both voices shrieked as one. It didn't feel like something from this world. I dropped the hatchet, tossed it into the bushes, and ran. I ran with everything I had. And behind me, even though I was putting some distance between us, I could still hear that chant-like voice.
Wemperon, Wemperon, Wemperonet.
Over and over, like a prayer, or maybe a curse. I peed myself, for real. I didn't stop running though. That chant, that mantra echoed in my ears as if it was right next to me, whispering, right into my skull. And that feeling behind it, that same killing intent I'd felt from the bear was there. Oh, it was there in every syllable. I dared to look behind me just once. There was something black, something long. It looked like a giant caterpillar. No, that couldn't be real. That can't exist, right? Later on, I'd get the chance to talk to an old man from the area, and when I told him what happened, I imagined he'd laugh at me, but he said, that might have been Ippokashi. Ippokashi? I started digging around the Ainu language dictionary and found something similar. Ippokashi. It meant deformed person. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I didn't do anything wrong. That thing was the one that came after me. That wasn't self-defense, that was self-preservation. Anyway, I kept running for who knows how long through the darkness, through the trees, soaked in fear, and eventually I fell down a slope, hard. At the bottom I found myself surrounded by farmland, like a cluster of small countryside farms. I remember being so relieved when I saw civilization again. I started running towards the buildings, limping really, screaming, "Is anybody there? Please, somebody help me." It was the middle of the night, but eventually, this old man and old woman came out of a dilapidated house. They looked at me like I was some kind of mentally ill person, and the old man squinted and said to me, "Who the hell are you?" I just kept repeating, "Please help me, please help me," and then they let me inside. After I'd calmed down a bit, I slowly explained what happened, from the camping trip to the bear to the creature in the bushes to how I hit it with a hatchet. And then the old man suddenly snapped, "What the hell did you do, you idiot?" He was scary. I mean, really scary. After a while, he kind of settled down though, and then he looked at me with a blank expression, not angry, not sad, and just muttered, "Why would you do something like that?" He explained the being that I had encountered, the Ippokashi, was considered a kind of protector or maybe even a god or yokai that helped humans. He had said it had once been a human, someone from an old Ainu or Sakhalin village, a person born with a deformity, a gentle, kind person, but the villagers hated them, feared them. Eventually, during a territorial conflict, they were killed, cut down by people from a rival tribe. Even then, the spirit didn't seek any vengeance. Instead, it became a guardian spirit for the village that had once rejected them and devoured invaders that had destroyed their homes. As a sign of gratitude, the villagers built a small shrine for them. They worshipped the Ippokashi and offered thanks for its protection. And that's the kind of being I'd struck with the hatchet. The old man was furious, scolding me thoroughly, and he made me promise to never come back again. Apparently my very presence was enough to anger Ippokashi now. Which, honestly, yeah, I couldn't blame it. It saved a human from a bear, and then the human betrayed it. That's how the old man put it. He also told me to leave everything I'd brought into the mountain behind, including the backpack and the hatchet. We'll burn it, like a purification rite. And I did. I left it all behind, well, almost everything. I secretly kept my field notebook. Since that night in the mountains, nothing has happened. I mean, at least not yet. But while I couldn't post here for a while, I started researching things like shishinoke and other Ainu words. The more I looked into it, the more I realized I had done something that should have never been done. Something irreversible. Even the people associated with shishinoke are probably long gone now. Maybe soon I'll be gone too. I just wanted to leave something behind, even if it's just this thread. So if anybody remembers me, even just as that idiot who posted the story about Ippokashi, that's enough. I'll leave with... There are roads in Japan that lead to nowhere. Winding mountain paths where the air is thin and silence presses against your skin like a warning. Paths where the forgotten still walk. This is the legend of Ubasute, the practice of abandoning the elderly in the mountains. It is a story of survival and cruelty, of ghosts and regret, and some say even now those who were left behind still roam the roads at night, waiting for someone to take them back home. The urban legend of Ubasute tells of a time when families, unable to care for their aging relatives, carried them into the mountains and left them there to die. The story goes like this. When a parent or grandparent became too old, too weak, or too burdensome, a son would carry them on his back, climbing higher and higher into the darkened woods. When they reached a place far from the village, where no one could hear their cries, they would set them down and walk away. The elderly, abandoned and alone, would often starve, freeze, or disappear into the shadows of the forest. Some villages called these places Ubasute-yama, or the mountain where old people are abandoned. Many say that in certain areas you can still hear their voices calling out in the wind. And if you ever find yourself on a quiet mountain road at night, you may see something out of place, an old woman walking alone. One of the most infamous haunted locations tied to Ubasute is the mountain roads of Kobe. Kobe is often seen as a modern urban city, but its surrounding mountains have a darker history. One night, a man and his friend were driving through a mountain road at 2 a.m. when they saw something strange. An old woman walking unsteadily alongside the road. Her hair was wild and unkempt, her steps slow and uneven, as though she might collapse at any moment. "That's strange. Why would an old woman be out here at this time of night?" the driver's friend whispered. Worried that she might be lost or ill, they decided to turn the car around to check on her. But when they did, she was gone. Vanished. The woman had been walking slowly, far too slowly to simply have disappeared into the darkness. Even if she had run, it would have been impossible for her to escape their headlights in mere seconds. Later they learned the truth. That mountain had once been an Ubasute site, a place where in ancient times families abandoned their elderly to die. And even today, some say the spirits of those left behind still walk the roads at night in Kobe. While Ubasute is often regarded as a myth or an exaggerated legend, history tells us a darker story, the reality of elder abandonment in Japan. During periods of famine and hardships, particularly in the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, and earlier, families in rural Japan struggled to survive. The winters were harsh, food was scarce, every grain of rice counted. Some families had too many mouths to feed, and elderly relatives who could no longer work were seen as burdens. In some regions, a form of population control called mabiki was practiced, where infants and the elderly were abandoned in order to save resources for the stronger family members. One of the most infamous historical famines, the Great Tenmei Famine from 1782 to 1788, led to cases where starving villagers abandoned the weak simply because they had no other choice. While there is no concrete proof that widespread Ubasute was practiced, there are oral traditions and local records suggesting that in the worst of times, some villagers truly did leave their elderly in the mountains. And whether or not it's common practice, the fear of being abandoned in old age left deep scars on Japanese folklore, scars that manifest in ghost stories still told today. It is said that in the mountains where Ubasute was once practiced, the spirits of the forsaken can still linger. Hikers and drivers tell stories of frail old women walking alone at night, like the one in Kobe, sometimes waving for help, sometimes simply staring. Unnatural chills in the summer heat, as if something unseen is watching. Soft, shuffling footsteps behind you, but when you turn around there's no one there. One legend says that if you stop to help the old woman, she will climb into your car silently, but when you look in the rearview mirror, she's gone. And sometimes when drivers pass by without stopping, they hear a whisper in their ear, "Why did you leave me behind?" The most famous Ubasute story is one of a son who couldn't let go. This is one of the oldest folk tales about a devoted son who was ordered to abandon his mother. As he carried her deep into the mountains, she began breaking branches and dropping twigs behind them. Confused, he asked, "Mother, why are you breaking the branches?" His mother smiled gently and said, "So that you can find your way back, my son." Even as she was being abandoned, she still thought of him. Overcome with guilt, the son refused to leave her behind. Instead, he returned home, choosing to defy his village and care for his mother until the end of her days. This tale was passed down as a lesson, reminding future generations that even in hardship, humanity must not be abandoned. Though Ubasute is no longer practiced, its themes of abandonment and neglect still exist in modern Japan. Elder isolation. Many elderly in Japan live alone, sometimes forgotten by society. Kodokushi, or lonely deaths. Elderly people who die alone. Their bodies are often undiscovered for weeks. Mysterious deaths in the mountains. There are countless reports of elderly individuals vanishing into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Some say that Ubasute never truly ended, it simply changed form. The story of Ubasute is one of sorrow, guilt, and survival, a tale that, while largely mythical, reflects real fears of aging and abandonment. Some say it was never real. Some say that the mountains still whisper the names of the ones who were left behind. And others believe that on certain roads, on certain nights, if you listen closely, you might still hear the slow footsteps of an old woman walking behind you. I work at a convenience store in Japan. It's a fairly standard job, long hours, repetitive tasks, an endless stream of customers. Some are pleasant, others are indifferent. And then there are the ones who make you wonder how they function in society. These kinds of customers seem to come out when I work the night shift. One of our regulars falls into this category. This man comes in almost every day, buying something small, drinks, snacks, smokes, but never once in all the time I've worked there has he been polite. From the moment he steps through the door, his attitude makes it clear that he considers us workers beneath him. When he pays, he never hands over the money properly. Instead, he just throws it onto the counter as if disgusted by the idea of direct interaction. If a new cashier is working the register and takes even a second longer than he deems acceptable, he makes an exaggerated click of his tongue before muttering, "So slow." If the fried food he wants isn't available, he doesn't just accept it and move on like a normal person. No, he makes sure to let us know exactly how much we've failed him. "You should have had it ready. Do your job properly." Every exchange with him is the same. No greetings, no acknowledgement of common courtesy. Just impatience, arrogance, and a complete lack of basic respect. Even when I ask, "Would you like your bento heated up?" he never responds right away. I always have to ask a second time, and only then does he give me the barest nod, like answering is a burden. And when I hand him his change, he snatches it away without a word and just storms off. Nobody likes him. But we're employees, and he's a paying customer, so we serve him like we would anybody else. He came in tonight, and things were different. Tonight he wasn't alone. He walked in with a woman, a well-dressed, polite-looking young lady. His girlfriend, I assumed. I watched them browse the aisles together, and for a moment he almost seemed normal, not so miserable, just like any other customer. But when they reached the register, his usual behavior returned in full force. He tossed the money onto the counter and didn't respond when asked if he wanted his food heated. He grabbed his change with that same dismissive attitude. And that's when it happened. Before I could even process what was going on, his girlfriend suddenly snapped. She turned to him with an expression that could have frozen fire and raised her voice so loud the entire store could hear. "Why do you always act like that when you're the one paying? The moment you're in a position of power, you treat people like dirt. But when you're dealing with someone above you, you act like the most obedient little servant. Do you realize how pathetic that is?" The whole store was silent. Even the other customers, who had been minding their own business, slowly turned to watch. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't have anything to say. He just stood there, eyes wide, his face rapidly turning red. But she wasn't finished. "Do you know what? You're exactly like your father, the one you claim to hate so much. No, you're actually worse, because you've spent your whole life trying to convince yourself that you're different when you're just not. And guess what? I'm sick of this, and I'm leaving you, like your mum left him. I'm done. Don't ever contact me again." At this, his face was burning red. The arrogant, smug expression he always carried was gone. His hands were shaking. And then, in a moment of sheer desperation, he bolted after her. The doors automatically opened as he ran out onto the street, shouting something I couldn't hear. But then, right in full view of the store, he punched her. Without hesitation, I reached for my phone and called the police. They arrived after a little while, took statements. I don't know if they caught up to him or are going to pursue him. Like I said, it only happened tonight. But I hope she stays the hell away from that guy. And I hope he stays the hell away from our store. My hometown is one of those suburban new towns, but most of the housing complexes are already falling apart. The place had changed into a town mostly inhabited by the elderly. This happened when I was in the 2nd grade. It was the height of summer, after school. About 8 of us who always played together decided to go on an adventure. Well, an adventure, but we only went about 2 kilometers from our homes. We ended up at the edge of a cluster of housing complexes right near a wooded area. The buildings here were older. It felt like the 1980s, not that I knew it at the time though. The whole area we had wandered into felt more isolated, and the air felt strangely heavy. We wandered through the woods for a while, just having fun, but as the sun started to set, we decided to head home. It was that time of day where the sky was nearly fully light nor completely dark. Dusk, the twilight hour. We walked back together, chatting loudly, when we passed in front of a housing complex. This place was different. It had 2 buildings standing side by side, but other than the front-facing road, the rest was surrounded by trees, making the atmosphere feel incredibly heavy. If you know the PlayStation game Yu Yamidori Tankentai, it was exactly like that. Hi, Jay here. I will link the game in the description for those interested. Back to the story. We were walking on the road in front when, out of nowhere, we heard a girl laughing. Huh? I thought, looking around. There was no one. None of us were girls either. We searched for the source of the sound, and then we saw her. There was a girl on the 2nd floor of the housing complex looking at us through a screen door. A little girl giggling that high-pitched kera kera way. Something about her was unsettling. The room she was in was pitch black. The darkness swallowed everything behind her, and yet she stood there by the window, perfectly visible, in a pink outfit, laughing. I stared for a few seconds, hoping to process what I was seeing. I turned to tell the others, but some of them had already noticed. They were just staring at her, silent, their faces stiff. That made the others, who hadn't noticed her yet, turn their heads towards the building. For a few seconds we all stood there frozen, just watching. Then, one of us suddenly screamed, and then we all collectively bolted. That was all it took. We all screamed and ran. I was wearing rollerblades at the time, and in my panic I tripped and fell. But I scrabbled to my feet as fast as I can, and I kind of roller sprinted after the others. We didn't stop moving until we reached the park near our usual hangout, surrounded by the safety of the housing complexes we knew. That's when we started shouting about what we had seen. It was a ghost, we were all saying. We got so worked up that we even ran to tell one of the neighborhood ladies, but she just brushed it off with a laugh. After a while, our conversation turned serious. We decided that we had to investigate that place again. Since the next day was a holiday and we had no school, 3 of us, including me, planned to go back in the morning. When the next morning came, we gathered at the park and set out. In the bright morning sunlight, the housing complex didn't seem as eerie as it did the day before. The first thing we did was check the mailboxes. I was too scared to get close though, I have to say. I stayed on the road while my friends went a bit closer to the building to examine them. One of them called out,
It was apartment 203, right?
"Yeah, that's the one," I answered, even though I wasn't exactly sure. Then my friend beckoned me over.
Come look at this.
I hesitated, but eventually I walked up to the mailbox. There was a round sticker on. I looked closer, and it said, "Relocated," followed by a name. That sticker was something people put on their mailboxes when they moved out. It would normally be removed when new residents moved in. In other words, apartment 203 was vacant, which meant that girl wasn't supposed to be there. It took me a second to process what that meant, but once it hit me, my whole body went cold. I wanted to run, but my 2 friends were strangely calm. One of them even said, "Let's go up to the 2nd floor and check it out." I really didn't want to do that, but since they were going, I kinda had no choice but to follow. We climbed the stairs and stopped in front of the blue door of apartment 203. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just looked like a regular door in a regular building. One of my friends crouched down and opened the mail slot, peering inside. Then, out of nowhere, he leapt to his feet and he bolted down the stairs at full speed. I didn't even think, I just ran straight after him too. We had no idea where we were going, only that we had to get away. We ran and ran until we reached an area with people, finally stopping to catch our breath. Panting, I asked my friend, "What happened? What did you see?" He looked shaken. Wind hit my face, out of nowhere. At first I was like, seriously, just wind? But then I thought about it. It had been a blisteringly hot day. Dead still. There hadn't even been a hint of wind. I was sweating that day. And that apartment was supposed to be empty. The windows were all closed. Where did that wind come from? That realization settled in, and none of us could say a word. The night before, we had all been hyped up, shouting about ghosts, but now we were faced with reality. All that excitement drained away. When we got back to school, we told the others about what we found. Some had already heard about it through the grapevine, and the whole class was buzzing. Some of the kids who hadn't gone yet got all fired up. Let's go after school today. But the three of us refused. We'd seen enough. The next day, those kids came back saying the place really was empty, so what did we see? Was it really a ghost? 8 of us had seen the exact same thing. There was no mistake. After that, the story of the ghost apartment spread through our grade. It turned out a few others had seen the same girl before. Some had even claimed that they had smelled burning incense near the building. But honestly, I kind of think those guys sound a bit suspicious, like they just made it up because they wanted some attention. As for the 8 of us who really saw her, we stopped talking about it unless someone specifically asked. Because for us, it wasn't a fun ghost story. We'd seen it. And once you see something like that, there's nothing fun about it at all. After that, the ghost story faded away. But I still wonder sometimes, who was that girl? And why was she laughing? You never really get used to those late night calls. Even after years on the job, that piercing ring in the dead of night still sends a chill through you. I remember it was around 3 a.m. when we got the call. Highway accident. Major injuries. Possible fatality. We rushed to the scene, sirens cutting through the empty roads. It wasn't until we arrived that we saw just how bad it was. A mangled car, its front end crumpled beneath a truck. The windshield shattered, debris scattered all across the road, like a trail of destruction. And there, pinned in between the twisted metal, the driver. He was still alive. By some cruel twist of fate, his lower body had been completely severed, but the compression from the wreckage had slowed the bleeding. His body hadn't realized yet that it was supposed to die. I'll never forget his eyes, sharp, aware, too aware. He knew. As we got closer, he spoke first, loud and clear. How much longer do I have? The question hit harder than I expected. We weren't supposed to lie, but what was I supposed to say? I hesitated. Then, relying on experience, I told him the truth. You have about 5 minutes. Maybe less. A long pause. Then he nodded. I want to talk to my family. His phone was lying nearby, miraculously intact, save for a few scratches and a cracked screen. We picked it up and found home in his contacts and dialed. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. We tried again and again and again. Nothing. The middle of the night, a sleeping household. They had no idea that just miles away, their husband, father, son, was dying in the cold, alone. I'll never forget the look on his face when he realized that no one was going to pick up. His breathing slowed, his body relaxed, and then he smiled and said, "It's okay. Thank you." He closed his eyes, and just like that, he was gone. Minutes later, his phone rang. We all froze. It was his family calling back. None of us answered. A woman's voice, groggy with sleep but instantly alert when she heard the word accident. She asked the question we were all dreading. Did he suffer? Silence. And then, against everything we had been trained to do, we lied. I said, he died instantly. That was followed by a pause, and then a choked sob from her. He didn't feel anything? No, we said. It was quick. He never knew what happened. That wasn't true. He knew exactly what happened. He had 5 minutes of clarity, 5 minutes where he was composed, but likely desperate to hear his family's voices for the last time. 5 minutes where he held on, hoping they would answer. Would they rather have known? Would they have wanted to know the truth? Or was this lie, the one we told to protect them, the right thing to do? I think about this way more than I probably should. Would it have been worse for them to live with the guilt? To know that they missed his last words? Or did we steal something from them? I don't know. I'll never know. But sometimes in the middle of the night, I still hear the phone ringing. In my mind, or in a dream. And I wonder, did we make the right choice? Let me start by saying this is a true story. No embellishments, no creative flourishes. Just the memory of a night I still can't fully explain. One that's kept me from ever fishing alone again. It happened one summer, about 7 years after the Great East Japan earthquake. You might have heard of it. The tsunami, the devastation, the lives lost. The scars it left behind weren't just physical. Some were different. Back then I was living in Miyagi Prefecture, and I'd been an avid fisherman since long before the earthquake. And after everything, fishing became kind of a healing ritual for me. When the ports were destroyed, it hurt to see those places. So many memories reduced to rubble. But slowly over the years, the coastline was rebuilt. Fishing resumed. Life pushed forward. I often fished with my friends. But that summer I found myself needing solitude, the kind only the sea can offer. So one warm August evening, I packed my gear, grabbed a thermos of coffee, and made the hour-long drive from the city to a quiet port I hadn't visited before the earthquake. It had been rebuilt entirely, so the layout was unfamiliar to me. As I drove down the narrow mountain road towards the sea, I noticed how dark everything was. No streetlights, no lamps on the dock, just the hum of my headlights cutting through thick mist. The port itself had 4 breakwaters. One ran along the base of the mountain, another mirrored it on the seaside. A third connected them, forming the docking area, and the fourth, a narrow finger of concrete, stretched from a small island out into the sea. The last one was known for good catches, but it required crossing a narrow strip of land from the seaside breakwater, and I wasn't about to wander onto an unfamiliar island alone at night. I parked by the seaside breakwater and I stepped out into the still, salty air. The only sounds were the soft lapping of water and the occasional creak of old ropes swaying in the breeze. Not another soul in sight, no cars, no boats, just me, my rod, and the dark sea. I set up quickly and cast my line. The water was calm, almost too calm. And that's when I noticed something. A figure, faint but unmistakably human, standing at the far end of the breakwater. It wasn't moving, just standing, motionless, facing the sea. I paused, thinking maybe someone had gotten here before me. But there was no car, no footsteps, nothing but the shape barely illuminated by the distant beam of my headlamp. I called out, just a soft,
Hello?
No response. The air suddenly felt thick. Charged. I thought maybe I was being silly, letting my nerves get to me. But still I reeled in and started walking back towards my car, keeping my eyes on that figure. As I reached the breakwater entrance, I paused. The figure was gone. I blinked, and I scanned the entire stretch of concrete with my flashlight. Just open space, no shadows, no sign anyone had been there. The breakwater wasn't long, maybe 30, 40 meters at most, and it was dead straight. There was no ladder to climb down, no railings, no side alcoves to hide in, and the water around it was still, quiet, calm. If someone had run, I would have heard footsteps surely, splashing, something. But there was nothing, just the sea lapping gently against the concrete. My own breath, and that strange feeling that kind of crawls up your back, all the way up to your neck when you know you're being watched. But you just can't find the eyes. I stood there, rooted, trying to make sense of it. I hadn't imagined it. There was someone there. I know there was. Then, in the silence, I felt it. A sudden pressure in the air, like something had shifted behind me. I turned around, fast. No one. But the wind stopped, and in that stillness I realized something else. I hadn't heard a single insect all night. No buzzing, no chirping, just the water. And now, even that seemed quieter, thicker, like the sound was being swallowed. I didn't want to wait around to figure out what was going on, but I stood there for a moment, frozen. Then something sharp pierced the silence, a high-pitched ringing in my ears, sudden and painful. I stumbled backwards, clutching my head. The sound was unnatural, electric, almost mechanical, but layered beneath it was something else, a voice, some kind of groan. It lasted only a second or two, but then it stopped. My instincts screamed at me, leave now. I bolted for the car, threw everything into the trunk, and peeled out of the lot, tires screeching on wet concrete. But the mountain road had another surprise waiting for me. Halfway up, my headlights hit a barricade, large metal pipes, like the kind used at a construction site, maybe for scaffolding or something like that. They were laid across the road in a do not enter kind of pattern. That hadn't been there before. I would have seen it. I'd driven down that road less than an hour ago. The pipes were thick, rusted and heavy. No way one person could have moved them alone. Not without equipment, and certainly not silently. I couldn't understand it, but I needed to go. I got out and tried to push one. It barely budged. Then I felt it again, that same ringing, only this time, under it, a low, wet moan, like someone crying out but muffled, distant, from beneath the ground, or the water. Panicking, I forced myself to focus. I got behind the pipes and I pushed with everything I had. After a few moments, I cleared just enough space to squeeze my car through. I didn't stop until I hit the convenience store back in town. Inside, under harsh fluorescent lights, I bought a bag of salt, and without hesitation, I poured it over myself and my car. People stared. I didn't care. I drove home shaking. That should have been the end of it. But over the weeks that followed, strange things started happening. Whenever I went to fish at night, even somewhere else, that ringing would return. Always at the shoreline, always in my own car. Sometimes I'd hear that groan again. It was becoming clearer each time. And once I parked near another port, I swear I saw it. That same figure, far off, at the end of the dock, silent, still, watching. Eventually I got rid of my car. It was a red second-hand Prius. Since then, I've fished during the day only. Exclusively. Never alone, never near that port. If you ever find yourself on that quiet stretch of Miyagi coastline, and you see a figure at the end of the breakwater, standing perfectly still, turn around. Whatever it is, I think it doesn't want company. It doesn't like to be seen. This happened when I got into university. It was a uni in Tokyo. Rent was gonna kill me, but thankfully a relative stepped in at the 11th hour. He owned an apartment there. I was told that I could move in at any time and rent would be free. I was over the moon. I think I started living there in early March. It wasn't a perfect deal though. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was grateful, but it wasn't exactly what I had in mind. The apartment was in a very old building, and the rent was very cheap, and most of the residents weren't from Japan. It wasn't designed for students, is what I'm saying. So there I was, surrounded by various smells and language barriers. I felt like I didn't belong, you know? But my uncle assured me that it would be fine, and above all, rent was free. I mean, who am I to complain? By the way, I didn't hate being around non-native people. I mean, it's just something I have to point out for this experience. I decided to make a go of it there. In April, classes started. I made many friends, joined many clubs, and discovered drinking. It was a riot. Every day felt like a rush. It was fun. One night I came back to my apartment after the third day of a 7-day binge. I was knackered, honestly, man. I kind of threw my hand up at the door to unlock it and leant on the door to gain entrance. I was really tired. I felt a sudden strange feeling of being out of place. As I pushed the door open, it revealed a surprising sight. There was a woman sat at the table. She had long dark hair. She looked to be Filipino. "Oh, I'm really sorry, I must have got the wrong apartment," I blurted out as I closed the door. That was really weird and embarrassing as hell. Even though I was pretty drunk, something didn't seem right. I guess mistaking the apartment is easily done, but why the hell did my key work in someone else's door? That's pretty disturbing. I looked at the door number, looked at the photos I had taken on my phone of my address, and it matched up. Something was very wrong here. I felt as if I had suddenly sobered up. Was there someone in my apartment? I put the key in the lock and I slowly turned it. I fearfully pushed the door open, and through squinted eyes I saw the inside of my apartment. There was no one sat at the table when I opened the door now. Was I so drunk that I was seeing things? I guessed I was a little overtired. I was convinced the booze and lack of sleep was to blame. I fell asleep pretty easily that night. A few months went by and I had almost forgotten about what happened that night, because nothing else happened. Until something weird happened. I want to tell you about it, but first I'll have to tell you about the apartment. It's kind of hard to explain, but the layout of my apartment went like this. When you walk through the door, you will see a door to the bathroom on the right and the kitchenette further along on the left. When you get down the hall, you will see a table in the main room. The walls are a standard grey colour and the windows have railings. I lived on the second floor, and the window in the lounge area looked out onto the street below. That window is the window I want to tell you about. When the nights and days were brighter and summer had come to Tokyo, I started to hear a strange series of noises coming from the window at night. Those noises would always creep me the hell out when I was home alone at night. It would start up at around 1 or 2 a.m., and it was a dull, thudding kind of sound. It sounded like someone was banging on the walls. It didn't really follow a pattern, you know? It wasn't as if it was a certain day of the week or an exact time, but one thing it was regular. At first I thought that it could be someone or something hitting the window from outside. I checked it and it didn't look like someone could reach the window easily, and nothing was out there that could be blown by the wind to clatter into it. It was summer anyway, 40 degrees outside with crazy humidity. There was no breeze. I wondered what the hell the person next door was doing then. I couldn't think what else it could be. I felt bad to ask questions to people who can't understand what I'm asking completely. The sound wouldn't usually last longer than 5 minutes each time, so I decided that I could just live with it. One night, one of the lights in my room went out. Even when I changed the light bulb, the light wouldn't work. I wondered if there was an issue with the wiring. I headed into town the next day to ask about how I could get it repaired. I mean, I was living there for nothing. I might as well try to help a little with household repairs. I found a local handyman and I went into his store. I told him the issue and he smiled. He was really nice. But when I told him my address, the smile on his face disappeared. Do you really live in that apartment? I felt a little weirded out. Was something going on here? I asked him what he meant. According to the local repairman, a former resident took her life in that apartment. She was a migrant worker from the Philippines. Apparently the method was hanging, and she did it by the window. That was also how the body was discovered, by a passerby. Imagine that. My blood ran cold. Things started to make sense now. The woman I had seen that drunken night wasn't down to me going into someone else's apartment. I had potentially seen an apparition. The noises I was hearing at night as well, the dull thuds which lasted no longer than 5 minutes. Could those thuds be caused by her feet skittering against the window as she hung by her neck? The desperate kicks still resonating in that apartment at night, signaling her spirit was likely not at peace. I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I walked home in the scorching summer heat with my forehead covered in a cold sweat and chills throughout my body. I looked for another place, and until I got it sorted, I stayed with a friend. This happened 2 years ago, when I was in my 3rd year of junior high. We moved to Ubasute in Ibaraki Prefecture because of my dad's job. It was the worst possible timing for a transfer, right before graduation. And I was pretty crushed about that, but there wasn't much I could do about it. It was work, and work takes priority. Still, what really killed my mood was the house we moved into. When I saw it for the first time, I knew it was going to take forever to clean. The yard was a mess, littered with snack wrappers and garbage bags, but what really caught my eye was one of the windows facing the garden, shattered glass still hanging in the frame. I remember thinking, who the hell's managing this place? I was stood outside when I heard my dad call out from the 2nd floor.
Hey, Kazuya, bring those trash bags from the car and come up here.
So I grabbed the bags and went inside. The moment I stepped through the door though, I felt it. Something was definitely off. The air was heavy, and even though it was almost noon, the whole place felt dark, like it was stuck in a permanent twilight. Just wrong. The staircase was straight ahead. A hallway led down to the kitchen and living room, and another room that looked like a traditional sitting room. Upstairs I could hear my dad, mum, and younger brother rustling around, cleaning up. We're a family of 4. I made my way up. My dad was already flapping out a trash bag, and he gave me a look that said something like, "Let's clean this place up from top to bottom. You two, come on." I joined in, reluctantly picking up trash that had been scattered across the floor. It was bad, worse than I could expect. Frozen food packaging, moldy candy, I think there was an umaibo at one point. Wrappers stuck to the floor, just disgusting. As I moved further down the hall, I reached the far end of the 2nd floor. Something on the left wall caught my eye. A section of the wall was covered in layers of duct tape. A lot of it. The color of that section of the wall was different to the rest of it. Too white, too clean, like it had been patched up or something. I stared at it. It was shaped like a door. And when I looked at the layout of the house, yeah, there should have been a room there. But there was no doorknob, just a sealed rectangle where a door should have been, completely covered in tape and white plaster.
Hey, why is this room blocked off?
I asked. My dad came over and had a look. He muttered something like this.
Oh, that's weird. I wasn't told about this.
And he walked off, phone in hand. As soon as he was gone, my little brother came over.
What's going on?
This wall, I think it used to be a door.
No way. Really? Well, that's kind of cool.
He reached out and ran his hand along the wall like he was examining some kind of weird museum exhibit. But then he stopped, eyes on the center. Hey, the tape here feels loose. I touched it too, and he was right. There was give. The wall wasn't solid beyond that spot. He started tugging on the tape, trying to rip it away. It didn't come off cleanly, it just tore in strips, but enough peeled away to reveal a small hole. Behind the tape, it wasn't wall. It was just darkness. Now, both of us were peeling. The hole grew, strip by strip, until it was about the size of a manhole cover. My brother leaned in to take a look.
Whoa, it's pitch black. I can't see a thing.
What, there's no light coming through the window? I asked. I peered in too, just like he had. Total darkness, not a single speck of light. It didn't even feel like a room, if I'm honest with you, more like a void. That's when my dad came back, and he wasn't alone. With him was the property manager, Yanagi-san. My dad froze when he saw the hole.
What the hell is this?
My brother explained how the tape had been loose and he couldn't help himself. My dad turned to the manager, his voice tight.
Yanagi-san, why wasn't this mentioned?
Yanagi-san looked shaken.
That's on me. I'm really sorry, actually. I didn't think anyone would. I mean, if we're gonna address it, you know.
He wouldn't even look at the hole. His eyes just stared at the floor. Then quietly he said, "Can we move downstairs? I'd like to explain things there." My parents agreed, and the three of them went down. I went outside. I needed to check something. That sealed room, where was its window? I circled to the side of the house, and yeah, there was a wall that looked different, brighter than the rest, like someone had sealed it up from the outside too. No glass though, no frame, just smooth white wall. A few minutes later, my parents and Yanagi-san came out the door. "We'll take care of the work," he was saying. We'll tear down the wall and we'll restore access to that room. At our expense, of course. Again, my apologies. My parents thanked him and he left.
"So they're gonna fix it, huh?"
I asked. My dad nodded. "Yeah, break it open, clean it up, no problem." That's when my brother screamed. He came tearing down the stairs like something was chasing him. "Something's in that room," he cried. He was pale, shaking. He said he'd leaned into the hole to get a better look and heard something. A sound way in the back of the room, like something was dragging itself across the floor. Our mum tried to brush it off.
"It's a rat, probably. Maybe raccoon."
"No," my brother snapped at her. It wasn't an animal, it was like something big dragging itself, like it was pulling something heavy across the floor. My dad said he'd block the hole for now and not to worry. That it probably was just a big rat. Later, I got curious. I grabbed a flashlight and went upstairs. The beam of the flashlight cut through the dark. Boxes, junk, dust, old toys, a storage room basically. No sounds, no movement. Still standing there alone in the hallway, I felt cold. The kind of cold that creeps into your bones. Like the whole house was watching. Well, at least that's how it felt to me. My dad came up the stairs next.
"What's in there?"
He said.
"Storage."
"I think that's about it. Still gotta clean this room out before the workers come," he muttered. Why would someone seal off a room like this? He patched up the hole with cloth and tape. I watched him do it. I told myself it was over, that we were done with this until the work got started. But before I left the hallway, I glanced back. The cloth was bulging slightly, like something behind it was pressing on it, trying to get through. My whole body tensed, and I bolted downstairs. We settled into the house. Parents took the first room. I got a room upstairs. My brother was supposed to have his own, but he refused to sleep on the second floor. He ended up sleeping in the living room. I didn't blame him. That night, I tried to sleep, and then I heard scratch, drag, scratch, drag. Something was moving outside my door. Something was coming from the hole. But I'll tell you this, that was only the beginning. That night, I tried to sleep. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Something rough was scraping against the wooden hallway floor outside my room. I turned off my lamp, hoping to hear better, and it actually worked. Thump, drag, scratch. A pattern, slow, methodical, like something moving without legs, like it was crawling, pulling itself closer, inch by inch. I pressed my ear to the door. I couldn't breathe. From that direction, where the room was sealed, something was dragging itself along the hallway, and it was coming towards me. Then there was a new sound that broke through the silence. Rip, tap, rip. Like adhesive being peeled from surface, followed by a gentle patter of something touching the floor. It clicked. The tape, the cloth, it was being peeled away again. Whatever was inside was trying to get out. I wanted to run, to yell, to do something, anything, but my body wouldn't respond. I was frozen. All I could do was listen. The scraping grew louder, closer, and then thump, right outside my door. I had no choice. I took a deep breath, mustered up all my energy, and I screamed. "Hey, Dad, Mom," something like that. I remember my voice cracked. And then I screamed again, louder, for help. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. My door flew open. My dad burst in, out of breath and furious. "What the hell are you doing? You're gonna wake the whole neighborhood." I couldn't answer right away. My mouth moved, but nothing came out. He followed my gaze towards the hallway. The cloth, it was gone. He walked over to the wall and swore under his breath. Then without a word, he recovered the hole with a new sheet of cloth and more tape. Later, downstairs over dinner, I tried to explain what I'd heard, what I'd felt. Mum rolled her eyes. Dad gave me a skeptical look, but my brother, he stared down at his plate and he said nothing. After dinner, I cornered him. "Hey, what did you really see yesterday when you looked in that hole?" He didn't answer at first. He just sat there, eyes unfocused. Eventually, in a low voice, he said, "I saw a hand, just at the edge of it, right in the light. It wasn't human. It was too long. The fingers, they moved slowly, like it knew I was watching." He wouldn't say any more than that. That night, I insisted on sleeping in the living room with him. I couldn't go back upstairs. None of us slept well that night. The next day, we tried to carry on like normal. I had to get ready for school, my first day at a new place. Dad was driving me. I realized too late that my uniform and bag was still upstairs in my room. I didn't want to go up there alone, so I asked my brother to come with me. He hesitated, but then nodded. And together we climbed the stairs. When we turned the corner, the cloth over the hole was gone again. My brother froze. I wanted to pretend it was nothing, but the hallway now felt colder, like something had recently passed through. I grabbed my stuff as fast as I could, and we both bolted downstairs. Later that afternoon, after school, I came home to an empty house. The door was locked, no sign of anyone. I used the spare key, and I stepped inside. Dark, silent. I turned on the TV and cranked the volume, needing some kind of noise to keep the quiet away. I dozed off on the couch and woke up to a loud bang. The TV was off, the lights too. I sat up, my heart pounding. Had the power gone out? I checked the street through the window. The neighboring houses were all lit up. Just us, only our house had gone dark. Panic began to set in. I stumbled through the dark towards the entrance, towards the breaker panel, and as I passed by the staircase, I heard it again. Slide, drag, creak. It was upstairs. It was moving again. I stood there staring into the blackness, and then I saw it. Something descending the stairs, not walking, crawling on limbs. limbs too long, fingers were curled in unnatural ways. It didn't make a sound, not a scream, not a whisper. I dropped to the floor. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. And before I passed out, I swear, this thing looked at me. It saw me. Not with eyes, but it saw me. I woke up in my room. My dad said they found me collapsed by the front door. The room with the hole was now open. The wall tore down, bright light flooded in. It looked normal, like a child's room. Toys, picture books, a small bed. But no one used it. Not once. We left the house a few months later, right after I graduated junior high. And to this day, I don't know what that thing was. But whatever it was, it didn't want to be forgotten, and didn't want to stay sealed away.